Always bring your own VGA cord. And can we switch over? We were here before, right? Yeah. Okay. We are here. All right, now, I need you to be completely silent and pay attention to the screen. No, completely silent. Pay attention to the screen. Here we go. Our moment of silence has ended. 1846, exactly 13.4 miles from right there, in Walden Pond, Henry David Thoreau wrote this: "There are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil to one who is striking at the root." Root striker. All right, now I want you to say that, okay? Root striker. Let's start. This side says root, that says striker. Okay, ready? Root striker. Root striker. Okay, all together. This is really fun. Root striker. Okay, root striker. Now, this event today was supposed to be a celebration. 5 years ago this month, Save the Internet launched, project of free press, a powerful and important cross-partisan movement to support network neutrality and other sane policies to protect and extend the Internet. Hundreds of thousands of citizens rallied to defend this network. Hundreds and thousands of citizens from all political stripes. Code Pink and Bill Sapphire. Move On and the Christian Coalition of America, Google and Microsoft, sort of, but sort of was good enough for Microsoft. Huckabee and Obama, all of them rallied with all of you to support this essential architecture of the Internet. And the leading political champion we all believed here was Barack Obama. And 2 years ago, when he became our president, we believed it was certain that we were going to win because, of course, as he told us, he takes a back seat to no one. Right? Remember.
We have the privilege to live in a transformational moment, a moment when an idea can change the world, a moment when technology empowers us as never before. To seize this moment, we have to ensure free and full exchange of information, and that starts with an open internet.
The most important thing we can probably do is to preserve the diversity that's emerging through the internet, something called net neutrality.
I will take a backseat to no one in my commitment to network neutrality.
I have a question about net neutrality.
The answer is yes. I am a strong supporter of net neutrality.
Once providers start to privilege some applications or websites over others, then the smaller voices get squeezed out and we all lose.
That, I think, destroys one of the best things about the internet, which is that there's this incredible equality.
What you want to do is to preserve this concept that everybody has equal access to the ultimate consumer, the ultimate user and producer of material on the internet.
I want to maintain that basic principle in how the internet functions. And so as president, I'm going to make sure that that is the principle that my FCC commissioners are applying as we move forward.
A back seat to no one. So he appointed his right-hand man, Julius Janikowski, and Julius and Obama got into the front seat, and they were supposed to drive on the road to sanity to get us network neutrality as a solid part, a principle, a core idea of communications policy in America. And we, today, would then be able to celebrate that success. But we are not celebrating today. halfway into this term, we are fighting to hold on to what I believe is a second-rate compromise of network neutrality by a compromised FCC, because activists such as the Tea Party and the Republicans, and I thought 3, I hear now 6 Democrats are voting to make the FCC regulations to support network neutrality illegal. Now, maybe they will be stopped in the Senate, maybe. But the astonishing thing to keep in view here is that this obvious bipartisan reform is most likely dead as a political movement. Now, how did that happen? It's not because there were a bunch of liars, and it's not because anybody's been bought yet. The reason ties to a story which a friend told me, and I'm going to repeat to try to hide as many of the characters in this story as I can. My friend was talking to an admired member of the FCC. The member was mentioning the latest block that was coming from AT&T. And my friend said to this member of the FCC, "I didn't know AT&T had a vote on the commission." And there was a pause, and quick as a whip, the response was, "They don't. They have 60 votes in the House." And it's not just 60 votes that they have in the House. The other side in this debate has had more than $100 million spent to fight this grassroots reform that we helped start here, that you spread across the country. They fought it with acres of AstroTurf, gaggles of talking heads, all committed to changing the color of black to white. The Tea Party Patriots, just this week, circulated an email. This is what they said in their call to arms to stop network neutrality. Network neutrality gives the federal government the power to regulate content on the internet by forcing every internet provider to carry every kind of content at the same price, regardless of the strain it puts on the company's network. Now, the appropriate response to that email is captured in this picture. What could you possibly mean by that insanity? But the insanity has worked. And here's the key: it will always work, so long as private funds drive public elections. And so long as Capitol Hill is, as my friend Jim Cooper describes it, a farm league for K Street, and so long as chairmen of the FCC can leave the FCC and go be a lobbyist of the very people they were regulating and earn more than $2.3 million, as Michael Powell has just done. So long as that's the system, there will be no opportunity for movements like these to establish policies that get to be established policies in our government. Now, I'm here to beg you to have a kind of conversion experience like the one I had about 4 years ago. For many years, I was fighting in the area of copyright regulation. I became an activist in copyright regulation on October 27, 1998, when Congress passed a statute in honor of this great American, Sonny Bono, the Sonny Bono Copyright Term Extension Act. The statute would extended the term of existing copyrights by 20 years. Now, the question Congress was supposed to be asking when they passed this statute was, did it advance the public good? And the thing we know about copyrights is that they are a monopoly given by the state to give an incentive for people to create great new work. Now, the one thing we know about incentives, in this universe, not the Star Trek universe, but in this universe, incentives are prospective. No matter what the US Congress does, they cannot get George Gershwin to create anything more. So it couldn't make any sense from the perspective of what copyright is supposed to do to extend the term of an existing copyright, no new incentives. So when we challenged this statute in the Supreme Court, and we had a brief that was signed by a bunch of economists, including this left-wing, that's Milton Friedman, right-wing, Nobel Prize-winning economist. Friedman said he would only sign the brief if the word no-brainer was in the brief somewhere. So obvious was it that this could not advance the public good to extend the term of existing copyright. But obviously there were no brains in this place when Congress unanimously passed this statute to extend the term of existing copyrights. What there was in that place was more than $6 million in contributions by the Disney corporations and others who would benefit from this gift from our government locking up our culture. Now, we lost that fight. And in the 10 years after that fight, we've lost many more. But the thing is, we have seen huge progress in the grassroots of this country, the teachers, the parents, the educators, the activists, who have recognized what this issue means, who've begun to see why it's important to keep our culture free. We've seen progress in people who want to understand and do the right thing, but no progress here. And when I recognized that, it's one of those moments when I realized I wasn't as smart as I thought I was, because it's such an obvious point when you recognize it. It's as obviously so. There's no progress in Congress so long as private funds drive public elections, so long as Capitol Hill's a farm league for K Street. Now, the point is, the thing that I saw is it's not just the case with copyright, esoteric subjects like copyright. Think about issues like Wall Street. We've just seen a collapse of our economy, triggered by a collapse on Wall Street, triggered in part by the recklessness of banks that were too big to fail. So after this collapse, an extraordinary intervention of the Treasury and an even more extraordinary intervention by the Fed to save our economy and save these banks, Congress got around to the question of reforming the system that led to banks too big to fail. And during the period of reform, lobbyists scurried to Capitol Hill to try to get Congress to do the, quote, right thing. There were 25 times the number of lobbyists representing the banks on the Hill than representing public policy positions on the Hill. And the result is that these banks that were too big to fail before are even bigger today. No change because of the influence of that money. Or think about global warming, right? We won this election. We thought, Democrats through the wazoo, I think that's how you spell that word. Anyway, wazoo, who were committed to doing something finally about global warming. We had an election where both presidential candidates were committed to doing something about global warming. What did the other side have? All the money in the world. What did we get after all the money in the world was deployed to stop this regulation? Nothing. We got nothing because they succeeded in blocking this regulation. Or think about the healthcare debate. My friend Ezra Klein wrote a piece after healthcare came out, which was talking about the way Obama administration had succeeded in neutralizing every single industry. And what he meant by that was that he had set them up against each other, but the editors at the Post had this unfortunate title, The Twilight of the Interest Groups, which the ever-pleasant Glenn Greenwald picked up on and wanted to pick on Ezra about because the suggestion that we'd seen the twilight of the interest groups in the passage of healthcare was too much for Glenn. This is what he wrote. If by neutralizing, Ezra means bribing and accommodating them to such an extreme degree that they ended up affirmatively supporting a bill that lavishes them with massive benefits, then he's absolutely right. But being able to force the government to bribe and accommodate you is not a reflection of your powerlessness, quite the opposite. The way this bill has been shaped is the ultimate expression and bolstering of how Washington has long worked. One can find reasonable excuses for why it had to be done that way, but one cannot reasonably deny that it was. Invoking the words of the 20th century's greatest philosopher, David Byrne, same as it ever was. But the point is, you need to begin to do this math, connect these dots, recognize how every single issue you and I care about, and not just you and I, people on the right too, every single issue we care about is blocked by the same fundamental rot. You have to have this conversion experience to recognize that we won't get anything real from our government until we change this. We'll get nothing substantial until we change this, until we take up that fight, Obama promised. We will lose. They will lose because real change, change that will make a lasting difference in the lives of ordinary Americans, will keep getting blocked by the defenders of the status quo. Now, our system was not designed to misfunction like this. Our framers gave us a republic. By that they meant a representative democracy. By that they meant a democracy that was supposed to have a certain kind of dependency. A dependency, as the Federalists put it, upon the people alone. So here's the way we could think about it. I do my own graphics. That's pretty cool, right? Watch, you can see it again. Congress, dependent upon the people. But the problem here is we have evolved a different dependency in that economy, not just the people, but increasingly the funders. Members spend between 30 and 70% of their time raising money to get back into Congress or to get their party back into power. They develop a sixth sense as they increasingly begin to recognize how every single thing they do might or might not affect their ability to raise money, and they adjust themselves to make sure they don't reduce their ability to raise money. They become shape shifters as they adjust their views to maximize the opportunity for them and their parties to become the party in power. Leslie Byrne describes when she went to Congress, she was told by a colleague from Virginia, always lean to the green. And then to clarify, she said, he was not an environmentalist. Now, this is a dependency. It's a different and conflicting dependency from the dependency on the people, because here's the fundamental math. This might surprise you. The funders are not the people. The funders are a radically different group. The top 1% are the funders, not the people, and that fact bends policies. This extraordinary study by Martin Gylens evaluated the difference between what Congress does when the top 10% want something and the bottom 90% want the opposite. What does Congress do? Who do they follow? The rich or the 90%? And what he found was a vast discrepancy between what Congress does for the people and what Congress does for the rich. They follow the rich, even though the rich are nowhere close to the majority of the people. So it distorts what Congress does, and it erodes trust in this institution. Gallup's latest poll finds 11% of Americans have confidence in Congress. Put that in context, right? There were more people who believed in the British crown at the time of the Revolution than who believe in our Congress today. 75% of Americans believe money buys results in Congress, a little bit more of the Democrats than the Republicans, but when the Democrats controlled, I can tell you the numbers were reversed, more Republicans than Democrats. This is a corruption of our system. It's not Rod Blagojevich corruption. It's not brown paper bag corruption. There's no quid pro quo bribery here that I'm talking about. Instead, it's a corruption of the independence of this institution to do what it was intended to do, to be dependent upon the people alone. Now, it will stay like this until we take up that fight. So how do we do that? I have 3 things I'm going to ask you to do today. Number 1, I want you to become root strikers. I want you to join us. We have something launched today, rootstrikers.org, where you can join us, or you can text your email to this cool number. It's going to hang around for a little bit. Cool number, which will join you to this to help you bring us into the space where we can get others to understand this. So number 1, become a root striker. Number 2, help us teach this lesson. Help us get people to connect the dots. And one way to do that is to tag every single example you see of money driving results with this hashtag rootstriker, which we will automatically be sucking into this space, rootstrikers.com, and collecting and sorting and organizing so anybody can begin to see what all of us begin to see when we say money buys results in Congress. And then that site will feed into another project just launched today. CC Mixter is running a Strike the Root remix contest. The prize to include signed art from the source of the art for this remix contest, which is Shepard Fairey, all of that to drive attention towards this focus on getting people to understand this cause. So number 1, become a root striker. Number 2, teach others. Number 3, the most important, wear Keds. Okay, now I'm wearing Keds, right? It's kind of hard for a 50-year-old to wear Keds, but there it is, Keds. Why Keds? So here's the story, right? So Keds is promoted by Stride Right. Stride Right was started by this man, Arnold Hyatt. Arnold's a shy guy. This is the biggest picture I could find of him on the internet. He's also a loyal Democrat. In 1996, he was the second largest contributor to the Democratic Party. So in 1997, Bill Clinton invited Arnold Hyatt and 30 other fat cats to a dinner at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington. And he asked each of these fat cats to stand up and tell him what they thought the president should do in the remaining years of his administration. We don't have a picture of this, but I sort of envision it's something like this. Arnold gets up, begins to address the president, and this is what he says. Mr. President, I know you're an admirer of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So I want you to put yourself in Roosevelt's shoes in 1939. When Roosevelt realized he needed to convince a reluctant nation to wage a war to save democracy. Because Arnold said, Mr. President, you too have to convince a reluctant nation to wage a war to save democracy. Not a war against fascists, but a war against fat cats. A war against people like us, people who believe that merely because we are rich, we have the right to direct public policy. Merely because we've been successful in the market, we have the right to get the president on the other end of the line or have dinner with him whenever we happen to be in Washington. People who have destroyed how this democracy functions because people who have convinced the people that democracy doesn't care about them. Yeah. Now, you can imagine in that room of 30 fat cats and the president, after Arnold was finished, there was a little bit of silence. The only published account we have of the evening says that in response, Clinton effectively slashed Hyatt to pieces, humiliating him in front of the group. Now, 15 years later, we need to recognize that it was Arnold Hyatt who was right that night. That we do need to convince a reluctant nation to wage a war to save democracy. But where Arnold was wrong was in believing that politicians were going to do this for us. It's not politicians who will wage this war. It's citizens. It's us. It's root strikers. It's you. When Franklin walked out of the Constitutional Convention, a woman stopped him on the road and said, Mr. Franklin, what have you wrought? Franklin said, a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. A republic, a representative democracy, a democracy dependent upon the people alone. We have lost that republic. Join us. Take up that fight to get it back. Become root strikers. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.